Good afternoon and welcome to the November 7th meeting of the Raleigh Appearance Commission. The Commission is charged with providing guidance, advice, and recommendations regarding the visual quality and aesthetic characteristics of the City of Raleigh. The members of the Commission are volunteers dedicated to the quality of design in Raleigh and represent a varied field of expertise. We will have staff review the staff report prior to the applicant's presentation and identify the administrative alternate findings that the applicant will need to address. For applicants presenting cases this afternoon, we ask that you take no more than 10 minutes to present your case. When you arrive at the podium, please state your name and address for the record. Once you present your case, including all the required items, the Commission may ask you questions regarding your case, and then we'll table it for further discussion. We may ask you to come forward again for further clarification. After the discussion, the Commission will set forth a recommendation to the Planning Director for a final determination. Thank you, and we will now start the agenda. Okay, AAD 21-19, 2020 Progress Court.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to let you know, because this wasn't on the agenda, AAD 2219 at 3700 Oak Forest Drive, the applicant wished to withdraw it from this meeting. They will be coming back at the next meeting on the 21st. So in case there's anyone here for that case on Oak Forest Drive, it will not be discussed today.
Thank you, Carter.
Okay. AAD 2119, this is a deferral from our last meeting. It's a request from an administrative alternate for section 7.2.5C, screening of service areas. The intent of the landscaping screening section is that to provide meaningful and well-designed screening and buffering, and that tree and shrub planting should not interfere with the safe vehicular and pedestrian circulation on the site. This is a 2.27 acre site zoned IX3, converting an existing warehouse building into office and restaurant uses. They presented at the last meeting. There were some concerns about the screening from the adjacent multifamily property to the rear. There's also some questions about the transformer and if possible about screening that. And I think there were some questions as well about the materiality of the screening compared to the design of the building. So the applicant's here to present that. We have some updated information in your packet and for you to look at.
All right, thanks. Will the applicant please come forward?
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Rob Allen with Gensler, and here with Kristen Stanciel with Stewart, our civil and landscape engineers. As the applicant, we are taking a warehouse that has been light storage. It's pretty basic Butler building, built in 1980, all brick clad. You can see from the site plan, it's hemmed into the site pretty well. There's some obvious limiting factors with the property lines to the north, south, and east. East is a railroad. So it's made it difficult to locate some of the utility service entrances and some of the location of items like trash. We're trying to enhance the building with considerably more openings for future office and food and beverage tenants. We are adding in some new materials, some black steel, some wood elements, and so the proposed enclosure, tries to tie into that materiality. Not a whole lot more to add to the description. It's pretty straightforward warehouse conversion. Obviously, trying to keep some of the character of the original building intact and kind of bring it into the 21st century, but. Like I said, it's very limiting with how some of the utilities, as we upgrade things like power, gas, water, how they can actually enter the building.
Hi.
Hi.
Kristen Stanciel with Stewart.
You say your address.
I'm sorry, 139 Daneborg Road, Durham.
Thank you.
I'm going to go through our presentation that we've updated slightly to clarify some of the information and talk about some of the additional landscape material. This is the proposed site plan that I believe we showed at the last meeting. This is an additional image showing the existing condition, and the arrow indicates where the approximate location of where the proposed dumpster enclosure would go. And then This is a revised planting plan that shows some enhanced landscape, some added evergreen mid-size vegetation. The owner wishes to remove the pines that were there existing and leave the hardwoods. The pines are the majority of the trees on on the owner's property side of the berm. So we would be proposing to replace it with cryptomeria and some fragrant osmanthus to try to offset some of the, if there's any smell from the dumpsters. I'll go back to the section, but these are some of the plant images. The cryptomeria would go in, we're saying at a minimum of 8 feet tall, and then some Nellie Stevens holly. We're proposing a 12 to 14 foot tall cypress, just trying to get some height in there. The Zelkova is a hardwood to tie in with the landscape of the proposed parking area. That is one of the vehicular trees that are required for the parking area. And then you'll see the osmanthus and the Burford hollies. I'll go back to the section. This was something that was requested just to understand the view of the apartments. They are one-story apartments, so they won't be getting a significant view downward. And then again, with the added vegetation and the wood enclosure that ties in with the wood to the building, we think this would be a substantial improvement to the existing condition. And again, this is the proposed enclosure. And then we've added to a rendering of the proposed building that shows the wood on the exterior that would look like the enclosure.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for clarification? All right, we'll table it and ask you to come back up if you have any questions. Thank you. So when I look at it, I think the site section clarified a lot of, at least my personal questions from before, and it alleviated a lot of our concerns. Does anybody have any? Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak on this case? No? Okay.
No, I think it addressed my concerns. I'd like to hear from the landscape, but I think the materials we talked about last time and how they correlate to the building, I think I appreciate the extra effort that they did to show that rendering and show how that would tie together. And I appreciate the extra effort that was given to address those needs.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think this shows the evergreen screening a lot better and getting some of that height to block the views from the apartment complex. Seems like it works.
Yeah, I'd agree. Seems like it meets the intent of the code now, and that's clear.
All right, do we want to go through the findings? You have something you want to say? Okay. All right, the approved administrative alternate meets the intent of the landscaping and screening regulations, and I think we agree that it does. The approved administrative alternate conforms with the comprehensive plan and adopted city plans. I think policy LU 5.2, managing commercial development impacts, LU 5.6, buffering requirements,
Yeah, UD 3.8, yep.
UD 3.8, screening of unsightly uses. Anything else? Okay, I think that's good. The approved administrative alternate is considered equal to or better than the standard. Yeah. I think it is. So do I hear a motion?
I'll motion to approve.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, thank you so much. Okay. Which one are we doing next? Is it Freedom Drive?
Yeah, Freedom Drive.
Good. Okay, so this is AAD-23-19, 1001 Freedom Drive.
Yes. And several other addresses too.
A lot of other addresses.
The applicant is requesting an administrative alternate for UDO section 1.5.9 transparency. The intent of the transparency requirements are to lend visual interest to street-facing building facades for both pedestrians and building occupants and minimize blank wall areas. This is not applicable to residential uses. The minimum percentage of windows and doors that must cover a ground story facade is measured between 0 and 12 feet above the adjacent sidewalk. More than 50% of the required transparency must be located between 3 and 8 feet of the building facade. 2 and 3 aren't applicable, so glass shall be considered transparent where it has a transparency higher than 80% and external reflectance of less than 15%. Glass on upper stories may have any level of transparency and external reflectance. So this applicant is proposing to develop a 27.96 acre site with 2 warehouse buildings. The property was recently rezoned to industrial mixed use, 3 stories conditional use. As the building is categorized as a general building type, the applicant is required to meet UDO regulations requiring a minimum of 20% of the street-facing street-level facade to be transparent. The application is requesting an alternate to the transparency requirements for the 2 north-facing facades, which each offer 12% transparency rather than the 20% required by the UDO. In addition, the glazing proposed only offers 70% transparency, which is below the minimum 80%. In lieu of meeting the transparency standards, the applicant is proposing additional clear story windows along the north facade. The applicant is also proposing additional sidewalks, landscaping, and amenity spaces between the buildings and the street to lend visual interest. Let me know if you have any questions, or I'll go on to blank wall.
Go ahead.
So, blank wall area is defined as any portion of the exterior facade of the building that does not include substantial material change, windows or doors or columns, pilasters, or other articulation greater than 12 inches in depth. Substantial material change means a change between materials such as wood, metal, glass, brick, etc. Paint color is not a substantial material change. The intent of blank wall regulations are intended to prevent large, monotonous expanses of undifferentiated building mass. The level of architectural detail should be most intense at street level where it is within the view of pedestrians on the sidewalk. This applies to both vertical and horizontal directions and ground and upper stories. So this applicant is required to meet a blank wall maximum of 50 by 50 feet. The applicant is seeking an administrative alternate for blank wall standards for areas on all facades of building 1 and 2. In lieu of meeting the UDO standards, the applicant is proposing a treatment on all facades that consists of a 4-foot wide full height panels in a different material than the rest of the exterior. These panels are spaced at 50 feet on center and most contain clear story windows. The applicant is also proposing other changes in material as well as additional landscaping and lighting to offset the visual impact of the blank wall area. Any questions?
Any questions for Allison? Okay, will the applicant please come forward and present your case?
A little short, so I'll have to adjust this. Hello again, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to review our case. My address is 3737 Glenwood Avenue here in Raleigh. I'm here on behalf of Nair Architects, along with Al Nair. I'm part of the project team. However, our architect of record could not be here, so he sent me on his behalf again. I want to be respectful of your all's time, so I think it probably makes sense rather than doing the full description of all of our sheets. Again, I'll just kind of highlight specifically the areas where we took your feedback from last time and incorporated that into changes in our sheets, which I think has resulted in a better project. So I'm excited about the changes. I hope you guys are too. Let's see. So this is a site for our project. This is just showing quickly some of the context around the site and how we've tried to be respectful of some of the similar building uses and things that are in the area. A lot of different types of manufacturing, warehouse, storage facilities. We see this as being primarily industrial with a small component of offices for each. So our building footprints are similar to what they were previously. We have added a little bit of a notch to the south of Building 1, and that was based on some building setbacks that we made that change. Otherwise, most of our changes have been in terms of the elevation. Additional things that we have added for clarification in this version of the drawing is showing the connection to the future Bullock Farm Road. I think that was one of the comments last time. And then also showing more of the landscaping and things that would happen around the building. So this is just an aerial showing both of our buildings. And again, sort of our placement on the site is based on trying to keep the loading dock area and trucks internally focused and keeping the more pedestrian-oriented spaces, offices, windows, things like that, sort of facing out from the site. So this is Building 1. This is showing benches and seating on the left side of the screen that would be along the future Bullock Farm Road, as well as access from the sidewalk in front of the buildings up to the road, and then parking, enhanced landscaping at each of the entries. Let's see. And on the elevations, probably some of our biggest changes that we made, one thing we heard from you guys last time was that we need to do more clear story glazing on the north facades. It does show that we still have the same percentage of glazing because it's only measured up to 12 feet, but we did actually increase the amount of glazing and adding those at the clear story along the north facade, which I think is going to give more daylighting. I believe somebody requested specifically for workers and things in the warehouse, but also will be high enough that it won't affect racking and storage for potential tenants. So that was one of the changes we made to the elevations. Another change that we made was respective to the relief of the panels. I know we discussed a little bit last time about the tilt panels, the thickness, and kind of like maximizing what that depth is we can get to. When working with our structural engineer, they recommended pulling it back 1 3/4 inch, and then also doing the form liner beyond that. So that's another 3/4 of an inch. So that gets our panel, I think, at the minimum to 5.5 inches, which was the least amount they were willing to let us go. So that maintains the integrity of the layout of the interior of the space, and as far as storage and not prohibiting things like that, but would also allow a little bit more delineation along the facade in terms of kind of pushing and pulling that surface.
So can I ask you before you move on?
Sure.
So you're saying there's like a 5.5 inch-ish setback every time we see the vertical?
It's 2.5 inches.
2.5 total setback.
Yes, every time you see the vertical. The exception to that being on the dock wall, and that's based on having the doors and the egress stair is also at those locations. That's actually spaced at 98 feet is the maximum, I think, between the gray that happens on that facade. The rest of them, it is 48 feet between each of the gray stripes. And although this elevation shows, it looks like there are only doors in some areas, it's intentionally laid out with the ability to add doors if we need to. Let's see. I think one of the other comments that we had was on lighting or doing something else to help add interest. So what you're seeing is the dash lines are intended to be uplights along, if you look at the north elevation, it would be along those facades that you would see right along the street. Then also adding those at each of the entry markers, in addition to just our regular, wall-mounted lights, and then also canopy lights at each of the entries. So that'll kind of give a little bit more, I think, security at night, but also a little something extra besides just the paint finish on the walls. So this is showing building 2 with what we're proposing is a future tenant like patio build out at the street. And again, one of the other components that we have sort of intentionally put in the design was following the setback of the road. So this building is curved to follow the setback of Bullock Farm Road. Similar to the other building is aligned along that setback, and sort of adding the recesses and interest for future tenant use and bringing some lighting further back into that space. I should note too, what we're showing as glazing in this corner, the lower portion that you're seeing, we're not including in our total towards our 12% that's facing the view, because it's technically on the east facade. But I think between that and our clear story that we have, we would be, but I wanted to hold true to the requirement that was asked, and I've only measured it 12 feet up on the north facade. This is showing the elevations for that building with the similar changes in terms of relief, lighting, and then also showing the loading dock spacing. I think one of the other comments we had last time was a concern for landscaping and bringing that up closer to the building instead of just at the parking islands, I think is what we were showing. So this view is just showing our intent to have denser plantings and landscapings up at the entries specifically, and then of course between along the building. But doing as much as we can in the areas where it seems like people will be going in and out, or maybe, you know, spending time outside and kind of maximizing those areas. And then this is just a sheet showing the intent behind some of the design and examples of what that would be. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
Are the clear story windows, so they're in every one of these recessed panel locations? Or is it just on certain?
It is on, I believe,
facades?
the 3 of the 4
West and the-
facades. Yeah, so the south elevation is the only one where that does not occur.
Yeah.
And on that elevation, it's just looking at sort of the fronts to our building, or the front sides. That one sort of adjoins the property that we have pretty dense plantings and things on that area. So we elected to put them on the facades we thought had higher visibility.
Mm-hmm.
I should mention too, I apologize, I forgot to explain our transparency selection. I think initially we had requested doing 60%, asked to get closer to 80, so we've come up with 70% glazing transparency that we could provide for.
So I have just the question of why not 80?
So and it may be a discrepancy in the, I guess, definition of like what we're considering transparency, and I'm gonna bet that's probably where this is headed. But with, of course, as you know, if you do clear glass, 2 panes, insulated, your visual light transmittance is still less than 100%, or I think less than 90%. For us to try and do what we think is the right thing is to do a low E coating on our insulated glazing units. That's what we normally do. That actually, in order to get that coating, it brings our glass visual light transmittance down to 70. What we use standard is the 60%, but in this case we found one we could use that would get us to 70. It's a pretty intricate balance, and I'm sure you guys have probably dealt with it before, of trying to keep the solar heat gain coefficient down and keep the visual light transmittance up. So that's where we're trying to balance that as much as possible. I think we could do more if we had to on the north, but I think we want to try and maintain that 70% at the lower, especially, as much as possible, just from a security point too, not having, you know, too much visibility into some of those like office spaces and things like that.
So I have one more point of deeper digging.
Sure.
So tinting and obscuring in other ways.
Yeah.
If it's just low E coding, and that's what's bringing you down to 70, that's one thing. I'm not, as an architect, convinced that you can't get to 80 with a low E coding. That's a question, but if it's for those other reasons, it's a different conversation.
I
And there
know-
might be other treatments that you have to work
Yeah,
on for that.
absolutely. And we do, I think the standard glazing that we use is a light gray tint at the 60%, but of course, bringing it up to the 70% is much higher visibility. I think to be honest, when we dug through the code, it looks like something specific, I guess, to North Carolina or this area is the ability to actually abandon some of the energy code for projects like this. We had a lot of discussion about it. It's just not something we want to do, to be honest. You know, we want to try and do the right thing. We feel like doing the low E coding is important.
Sure.
We want to try and keep it as efficient as possible. So I think the 70% was us, I guess, trying to get closer to what you're asking for and then still kind of balance that need.
This may be a table limit discussion. I'm just going to push back and say you have like no glass on the whole facade, just in general. So I think from a percentage of opening, it's teeny. So that also has to factor into the balance
Yeah.
of the energy efficiency. So anyway, we'll discuss that more.
Okay.
But
Yeah, that
you've
makes
at least
sense.
answered my question as far as like, what are the decision points that are getting you to the 70%?
Yeah, it's definitely been something we've looked up lots of different options to try and find the best way to do that. I know that our percentage of glass seems minimal. It's a big building, so the actual square footage of glass is still a lot. Yeah, so we want to try and get as much light, especially into those lower offices, as possible. And that's where, if the concern is the transparency on the, I guess, the street frontage, those lower windows, it might make sense to bring up, but I don't know that we would want to do that for the whole project.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
On the site plan, the spots that are labeled with number 4, looks like those are where all the entries are. I was just wondering, it looks like the only one that you can really have landscaping at is that northeast one on building 2.
Let's see.
Is that right? Is the other ones, the parking comes up to the edge of the sidewalk and then the sidewalk comes up to the edge of the building?
I apologize, that's misleading based on this view. It's a top-down rendering, so it's showing the roof
Okay.
out a little bit. There is actually, I believe it's 10 feet of landscaping between the sidewalk and the building. That's just not being represented well here, so I apologize for that.
And that's the same on building 1?
Correct.
And building 2?
Yeah. Yeah, that's in addition to the landscape parking islands.
So you all discussed the amenity space previously? Was that part of the comments before, or was everybody, I wasn't at that,
At the courtesy.
yeah.
I don't know how much conversation we had about the amenity, if you want to ask for clarification.
Yeah, I'd just like to have some clarification on, it says that in lieu of, they have provided additional amenity space, and I'm trying to find the exact. The applicant is also proposing additional sidewalks, landscaping, and amenity spaces between the building and the street.
Are those the benches you mentioned?
So the amenity spaces,
Yeah, we tried to, because we were planning the recess with the future tenant spaces a little more robust on building 2. That's why we added the park bench area with additional landscaping for building 1.
I see you have on the site plan, number 2, retention pond with fountain and retaining wall. Is there, that image shows a path going around it, but I don't see it on the site plan. Is there a hardscape path going around that? Or is that a grass strip?
I'm sorry, are you asking if there is a path around the retaining?
The retention
Wall.
pond?
Retention pond?
Between the retention pond and the retaining wall?
Right now, I believe that we just have the retaining wall adjacent to the pond with a fountain. So the parking is up above that
Okay, so there's no access down to that
to
area.
the, correct?
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody from the public who wants to speak about this case? Okay, so we'll table it and talk. What's your thoughts?
I appreciate the improvement from what we saw last time. It's not a blank wall anymore. Or sort of better than it was.
2.5 inches better,
Yeah.
that much better.
We got
A little
some
bit of a
color
shadow
change.
line.
It's better.
Got some color change.
Yeah, I will say that, I mean, the clear store, the windows up above are, to me, they might not be major here, but it'll be internally, it'll be a huge impact on the people using the building, and I think it's well worth the value, the extra effort there to make that a little bit better.
Now, with the windows, do we push for 80%?
So I want to ask the other architect here.
Yeah, I mean, it does, to your point, it doesn't really seem like there's a lot of glazing on the building, so why not try and push for as much transparency as possible?
I'm all for low coating,
We've
I'm
had,
all
yeah,
for-
I think low E coating is pretty standard around here now. We've had this conversation here recently with other projects that have come before us, and I think it's a high standard, but I think there are glazing, we've mentioned Solar Band, 70, 90 XL. I mean, there's glass, there's glazing that will meet those requirements. So, I don't know above if it really helps
I don't
us,
care.
but I think, down at the pedestrian level.
Absolutely.
And with the cases we've seen before, with the glazing issues, especially when it's office area, we make comment they're probably going to hang blinds as well. So that offsets the trouble there
Yeah.
from a security standpoint.
Agreed. Okay, all right. Let's go through the findings. The approved alternate meets the intent of the transparency requirements. I'll read the intent, just so we know. The transparency requirements are intended to lend visual interest to street-facing building facades for both pedestrians and building occupants and minimize blank wall areas. So I think with some of the added measures that the applicant has employed to increase the visual interest, I think we're getting close to the intent. Do you agree?
I would agree.
Agree. Okay, so it meets the intent. The approved alternate conforms with the comprehensive plan and adopted city plans. I think policy UD 1.2, architectural features, UD 1.3, creating attractive facades. Any others?
That's about it.
I think that's it. Okay. So the street-facing building facade utilizes other architectural treatments to create visual interest to offset the reduction in transparency. And I think we agree that with the changes that were made since the last time we saw it, that they're there. All right. So would someone like to make a motion? And I'm going to posit that it
So
needs to
these
be
would be separate?
conditioned. Yes, we'll do blank wall and transparency separate. So let's, does it matter if we?
Zero now, then you'll do blank wall.
That's what I would hope. So I want to posit that if we make a motion that it has a condition for 80% transparency on the glass,
On the lower level.
if, on the lower level glass, if the commission is in support of
80%.
that.
You want to go 80%?
For
I
clear
think-
stories, I'm not,
Ground level, glazing,
ground level is what I'm worried
80%?
about.
Agree with that.
Yeah. Second.
Yeah, I think we're not already meeting the amount, so I think that the glass that they do provide needs to, at least at the lower level, needs to maintain that 80%.
Yeah.
Motion to approve with condition?
Second.
Just want to make sure we're clear on the condition.
So the condition is that all ground level glass, so
What's your height?
12 feet,
Okay.
so 0 to 12 would meet the 80% transparency. Anything above that it's fine to be 60%.
And would that 80% on the ground level be low E as well?
Yes, absolutely.
So it's low E and 80%,
Can
12 feet and under.
Can we craft that to basically say the commission supports low E coating on the glass?
That's what you,
I
what you
don't know
want
that
to
we
put
can
on there.
require that, but I think we can say
Yeah.
80%.
Yes, they can check it
I
off.
think we, yeah, I think we can say 80%. I don't know that we can. It's probably gonna be low E, but
Carter, do you mind kind of reading that? Will you read the condition back to us, please?
I was hoping.
Or someone. Lee, can you read that back for us?
With the added condition, the ground level, 0 feet to 12 feet, must be 80% with low E coating that is supported or suggested by the commission.
Good. All right. So all in favor?
aye.
Aye. All right, let's go to blank wall. Okay. The approved alternate meets the intent of the blank wall area regulations, and the intent is that the blank wall area regulations are intended to prevent large, monotonous expanses of undifferentiated building mass, and the level of architectural detail should be most intense at the street level, where it's within view of the pedestrians on the sidewalk. So I think with the change in material, the change in plane, and the clear story windows, that we're there with the intent.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, the approved alternate conforms with the comprehensive plan and adopted city plans. So let's substantiate that. I think policy UD 1.2, architectural features, and 1.3, creating attractive facades.
UD 2.1 from the standpoint of the adjustment they made on the building too.
Okay. All right, so the increase in blank wall area is offset by additional architectural treatments and increased vertical landscaping, and we agree that that's
Day
happening.
and night with the lighting as well.
Agreed.
Mhm.
And the amount of blank wall area for buildings located on an urban frontage should not be more than 40%. How do we verify that in the findings?
How do we verify the 40%?
The number 4 of the findings.
On an urban frontage.
So are we there?
Well, it'd be non-applicable. 'cause it's not
Non-app,
urban
okay,
frontage.
perfect. All right, so good.
Warehouse.
All right, so someone want to make a motion?
I'll motion to approve.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, all right, thank you.
Nice. Yeah, exactly.
Did you want to ask? Yeah. Go ahead.
Excuse me, thank you. I'm Richard Brown with Kimley Horn here in Raleigh. We just wanted a clarification on the first condition of transparency, so the application of that condition for which would normally be for frontage or street-facing sides. Does that condition intended to apply as the code applies it, or to all ground level transparency?
Well, your request was only for street facing, so it'd be only on that street facing side. So that-
Okay,
yeah,
we just wanted to make sure whether the condition needed to differentiate that or not.
Area, so I think as you approved it on that.
The straight face and the little
Okay.
cove.
Yeah, we're
Mhm.
fine with that. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying.
Okay, so courtesy review.
Okay, thank you. The applicant is requesting a courtesy review for potential administrative alternate for section 7.1.7, vehicle parking lot landscaping. The intent of which is to minimize the visual impact of large areas of vehicular parking as viewed from the public right-of-way and dissipate the effects of the urban heat island. Number 2, a well-designed parking lot utilizes landscape island and clear delineations to break the parking lot into smaller segments. And 3, tree and shrub planting should not interfere with the pedestrian circulation of the site. The applicant is proposing to redevelop a vacant portion of a 43-acre site zone planned development that contains a multifamily residential retirement development. Additional multifamily residential building is proposed along with associated surface parking. Per the code, a landscape interior island must be provided every 10 parking spaces and be evenly distributed throughout the parking area. The applicant is requesting an alternative to the 10-space requirement and planting requirements in 4 locations, which are shown on the attached drawing, and in order to accommodate larger structures for additional covered parking. In lieu of meeting the interior island requirements, the applicant proposes moving the displaced trees and landscaping to other locations in and around the parking lot. I believe the applicant is here. But in terms of the findings, number 1 is that the alternative meets the intent of the vehicle parking lot regulations. Number 2, that it conforms with the comp plan and the adopted city plans. And number 3, that the approved alternate is considered equal to or better than the standard.
All right, will the applicant please come forward?
Good afternoon or good evening. I don't know if it's 5 o'clock yet, but either way.
Close enough.
Peter Knosson with Jones Knosson Engineering, 221 North Salem Street, Apex, engineer for the owner of the Cypress. Just to give you a little background, the Cypress, as Carter noted, is a continuing care retirement facility catered towards seniors. It comprises most of the block surrounded by Lead Mine Road, Strickland, Harvest Oaks, and Forum Drive. Specifically, we are under construction of the last building within the Cypress. It is Villa E, and it is here at the intersection of Strickland Road, which is this street here to the north, and Lead Mine to the west. We are showing covered parking in our approved SPR plans with the city. That covered parking is here. I'll just note these. There are 3 areas. Those are the existing covered parking that were approved. What we are proposing is to add 2 spaces under the covered parking here, 3 spaces there, putting this entire row of surface parking under covered parking and adding covered parking to what was shown as surface parking at that location. What that will do is remove 4 large trees here, at these 4 locations, as well as some smaller understory trees there. We are proposing to relocate those trees, which are shown on this plan. You can see the 4 large trees here on the north side of the surface parking, and the 3 small understories, we'll add those to those islands. Just to give you also there's some pictures just to show you what our existing covered parking throughout the development. There are 5 villas. We're working on number 5, and these will just give you an idea of showing what are the existing covered parking areas with the villas behind. And these will be the same type of covered parking that will be used that we're proposing. You can see they're still very heavily landscaped and blends in very well. I like this picture here, but blends in very well with the community. We believe that the covered parking is important for this type of development catered toward the elderly, where often there are people using walkers, wheelchairs, and to keep them under cover, we believe is important. So that is really why we're making this request to you. Going through I think there is another slide there. Just to orient you back again, I believe there are some photographs here in your packet. Let me see if I can. Will those blow up a little bit?
There's a zoom kind of,
Will that work?
try that.
I really just wanted to show you these two views. This view here is along Lead Mine Road. That's the frontage. The parking is behind that. And here is your frontage along Strickland Road. Again, the parking is behind that landscaping as well. So it's a very heavily landscaped site along the street frontage, all around the perimeter of the parking. And we just believe that this is going to be a benefit to the residents that are a part of the community.
Could you just show again? Can you just show again where you're putting the larger trees? Is that out on the Strickland Road side?
Let's see.
Right.
They are.
Okay.
Those are the 4 large trees that we're proposing, yes. And just to let you know as well, we have a berm that was constructed right here at that location. And that's got landscaping as part of it as well, so this is just going to enhance that area. In terms of just going through the findings of what we have written, in terms of visual impacts, the impacts related to the site from Lead Mine Road as well as Strickland, you can see basically the heavy landscaping there that really going out there, you won't even be able to see the parking. In terms of stormwater runoff, all the runoff from the parking is collected in catch basins and piped to a stormwater pond for treatment that is on site. The effects of urban heat, given that we'll be providing covered parking over the vast majority of the parking lot, we see that being reduced substantially from what actually was originally proposed. It does meet what we believe the comprehensive plan and equal or better to standard. We believe that as well, given that this is an elderly community, and providing them with as much covered parking, getting them out of the elements of rain, hopefully no snow and such, is a benefit to them. So really we're just modeling and mirroring what has already been built out at the Cypress with the cover and parking, and we appreciate the courtesy review and look forward to your comments.
All right, thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, so the 4, all the trees that you're removing, what size are they now currently?
Out on the frontage?
Yeah.
Oh, they're gosh, they're probably 20 to 30 feet high.
There aren't trees he's taken down.
Oh, we're not taking any trees down on the frontage.
Okay.
We have tree conservation. I should have told you. We have primary tree conservation there along Lead Mine Road. We have all this existing area.
Yeah, for some reason I was thinking you were saying in order to do new covered parking, you are removing certain trees and
Cutting them down.
Oh, no, not
Okay.
at all. Not at all.
I was with you. I had the same interpretation, and I was like, no, this
Okay.
isn't built yet. So,
No. All the street frontage on Lead Mine and Strickland, we are not touching.
Okay.
Just internal.
It's
There
all
are trees
internal.
internal.
Correct.
4 trees internal.
okay, let me ask clarification then. Are there trees that are existing internally that are being cut down to put the covered parking in place?
No, nothing that hasn't already been removed, no. I mean, we did remove some trees, but they were allowed to be removed in order to put in this development and the parking.
The parking lot itself.
But I mean, the
Trees out.
site, you're developing the site currently.
Correct.
So it's not like there's trees and parking islands that you're taking down to do
No.
this? Okay,
There are no existing trees in the parking areas.
Okay.
thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, that was really confusing.
Yeah,
All we're proposing is removing.
like when you were Xing them out, you were like, we're taking these out.
Oh.
Like, and we interpreted that to mean like cutting them down, but they don't exist yet,
Oh.
so.
X marks the spot.
Well, and also you have 4 beautiful big trees or something there highlighted. I was like, are those the ones leaving?
Right.
I
Yeah.
didn't know.
So, we got it.
We were just showing those for the ones that we were going to take from point A to move them outside.
They were planned for point A.
Correct.
Correct.
That's the
Okay.
difference.
Correct.
Right.
Moved,
Yeah.
not removed. Fair.
Correct.
Yeah, everything we see there is proposed except for the tree conservation.
That's existing.
building,
Correct.
everything, nothing's there yet.
That's right.
Paramount.
Sorry, I
From
should have
a-
been more clear.
From a, I mean, this
don't
seems
eat
cut and
grandma.
dry to me. It seems like a really good alternate.
Okay, we'll table it and we'll
Okay.
talk.
Thank you.
Yeah, I am with you. I think the covered area is totally consistent with the type of development, and I think from a visual interest standpoint and a urban heat island, like, I think it's fine. I don't know how you feel about that.
We see this a lot in retirement communities. The covered parking's crucial, honestly. It's almost like they expect it at this point. And so the fact that this parking lot was already there and it's just an addition, it's a structure on the existing hardscape, I'm good with it. I think it's good. And they didn't take any of the trees down. The conservation area is large. From a visual from the street edge, like you said, you won't even see it hardly, so.
I'd agree with that. I think, with past development within this development, I mean, they've done a very good job with their tree plantings and from the street. I mean, you really don't even know it's.
And this group in
there.
particular, they want it very lush.
Yeah.
It's a good area.
It's really an internal question, and, I think they meet the intent.
I agree.
Yeah. Do you have any other questions for us?
No, can you approve it?
No.
Valiant effort, yeah.
But it says
It would be
courtesy
easy.
review.
It would be easy if we could.
Just do the same thing next time you come back and it'll be fine.
Just be more clear about the trees.
Don't talk about the trees.
Yeah, correct.
We're keeping
You're
all of these
changing the
trees.
proposed location of.
Proposed location of the
Yeah.
trees. There you go.
Thank
Thank you.
All right, so that concludes the public portion of our meeting.